All right, buckle up because we're going deep into some CIA secrets today. You sent over the YouTube videos on declassified CIA operations, and wow, some of this stuff is unbelievable. Mind control, spy cats, like we're talking seriously strange stuff.
It really is amazing what these declassified stories tell us, about how espionage has changed, especially during the Cold War, right? It kind of makes you think, how far were these agencies willing to go? And were there any lines they wouldn't cross?
Yeah, I mean, looking at this list, we've got Project MKUltra, that's the one with the CIA, and all that mind control research, right? Pretty scary stuff. They're using LSD and who knows what else. Then there's Acoustic Kitty. Wait, they actually tried to use cats as spies.
Oh, yeah?
And then there's Operation Paperclip, recruiting former Nazis after World War II. And of course, you can't forget Area 51, all that mystery surrounding it.
Seriously, every single one of these operations gives you such a um, unique perspective on the strategies and anxieties of the Cold War. You know what I mean? And they also bring up these really important questions about, accountability, that balance between national security and individual rights. That's always a tricky one.
Yeah, for sure. Where do you think we should start?
Well, I guess we got to start with the one that everyone's at least heard of, right? MK Ultra. I mean, the CIA was really obsessed with mind control, weren't they?
It seems like they were totally convinced that the Soviets were already using these techniques and they had to catch up. Like they wanted to be able to control people, get information out of them. Or even like create those programmable assassins, like in the Manchurian Candidate, that whole thing.
Yeah. But for them, the idea of mind control wasn't like just a theory. MK Ultra involved this massive network of researchers, tons of experiments, many of them done on people who had absolutely no idea what was happening to them. It's a seriously dark chapter, in the history of scientific research.
Yeah, those LSD experiments, they're especially disturbing. Like there's Harold Blower, the Hedis player, he died after they injected him with MDA without his consent. Or remember those experiments in the Kentucky prison? They dosed those addicts with LSD for like 77 days straight. And then you have Operation Midnight Climax. They used prostitutes to slip unsuspecting men LSD. I mean, where do you even begin to figure out the ethics of something like that?
Well, the thing is, it's not like MK Ultra was just about LSD, right? They also explored hypnosis, electroshock therapy, sensory deprivation. I mean, they even got into psychological torture. And don't forget about that Dr. Ewan Cameron in Canada. He did these just incredibly damaging experiments on his patients. And a lot of them were left with, like, permanent scars.
It makes you wonder how far they were really willing to go, what they thought they could actually achieve. It's kind of hard to believe that stuff like this actually happened. And speaking of hard to believe, the story of Frank Olson, he was a bioweapons researcher who got, pretty disillusioned with the CIA. He'd seen some of their operations firsthand, and it really messed him up.
Oh, yeah, Olson's case is a tragic example of what can happen when you mix secrecy and national security with, individual rights. So they unknowingly gave him LSD. A little while later, he dies, falling from a hotel window in New York City. The CIA, they claimed it was suicide, but the whole thing's suspicious. His family, they fought for like years and years to find out the truth. There were even these connections to the CIA's assassination manual, which basically outlined different ways to make a death look like an accident.
The whole thing is just shrouded in mystery, isn't it? It brings up so many questions about what really went down and why. It's a, pretty chilling reminder of the kind of power the CIA had and the lengths they were willing to go to protect their secrets.
Yeah, and, Olson's just one example, right? These programs, they had devastating consequences. I mean, for these individuals, their families. His case, I think, highlights just how important transparency and accountability are, even when we're dealing with stuff as sensitive as national security.
For sure. And then you've got Operation Mockingbird, which is basically the CIA's attempt to control like the entire media, planting stories, hiring journalists, trying to like twist public opinion to their advantage.
MKUltra and Operation Mockingbird, they both point to this pattern, right? Like this willingness to deceive, to operate outside of any ethical boundaries. Makes you wonder what other secrets are still out there, hidden away, and what the long-term consequences of these actions might be.
Definitely unsettling to think about. Yeah. But, MK Ultra, as crazy as it is, it's just like one piece of the puzzle. There's so much more we need to uncover about the CIA and what they were doing during the Cold War. Ready to move on to some other CIA adventures?
Oh, absolutely. Let's jump into the world of espionage and all their dirty tricks. Things are about to get even more complicated. So let's talk about Operation Paperclip. This is where the U.S. government started recruiting, get this, former Nazi scientists after World War II. I mean, talk about a controversial move.
Yeah, no kidding. You're talking about people who participated in some of the most horrific acts in history. But I guess at the same time, they had this valuable scientific knowledge, and the U.S. was eager to use it, right?
Exactly. It was like this real ethical dilemma, you know? I mean, you have these brilliant minds who could potentially give the U.S. a huge leg up in the Cold War. But then there's the whole, their past actions, their horrific past. How do you begin to weigh something like that?
Yeah, it's a tough one for sure. Seems like a classic case of the ends justify the means, wouldn't you say? And it definitely caused a lot of debate back then.
Oh, absolutely. One of the most well-known figures from Operation Paperclip was Werner von Braun. He was a rocket scientist, played a key role in developing the V-2 rockets, for Nazi Germany. But he ended up working for NASA and actually contributed quite a bit to the U.S. space program. He even had a hand in the Apollo moon landings.
Wow, that's a pretty wild turnaround. I mean, from making weapons for the Nazis to helping put a man on the moon, it makes you wonder about the whole idea of redemption. Can someone actually atone for something like that?
Yeah,
But this idea of moral compromise, it seems to keep coming up when you look at the CIA, don't you think?
it certainly does. Which leads us to another, well, controversial aspect of the CIA, assassination attempts.
Oh, right. Now we're getting to the real cloak and dagger stuff. Eliminating leaders who were considered threats to U.S. interests. Sounds like something straight out of a spy movie, but with real-world consequences, right?
Exactly. One of their most famous targets, well, he was a constant thorn in the side of the U.S. government, Fidel Castro.
Oh, yeah, the Cuban leader.
Right. And they tried everything to get rid of him. Everything from like super elaborate plots to straight up assassination attempts. But Castro, he always managed to slip through their fingers.
It's a little unsettling to think about, the U.S. government actively trying to kill foreign leaders, even if they were, considered enemies. Did they ever think about, like, the potential fallout or how it might destabilize those countries?
Well, you have to remember, this was all happening during the Cold War. The U.S. saw itself as like in this global battle against communism, and they were willing to do whatever it took to stop it from spreading. These interventions, I mean, whether they worked or not, they had a huge impact on the politics of a lot of these countries, often leading to, unrest and violence.
It's definitely a complex part of history, morally ambiguous for sure. But, not everything the CIA did was super serious. They had, let's say, a more quirky side. Like, remember Acoustic Kitty?
Oh, yeah.
Their plan to use cats, as spies. That's got to be one of the weirder things we're covering today, wouldn't you say?
Acoustic Kitty, yeah, it definitely stands out. It was definitely one of their more unusual ventures, and yeah, it failed miserably. But they were basically trying to take advantage of, how stealthy cats are, their ability to, like, move around unnoticed. So they surgically implanted microphones and batteries into these cats, tried to train them to get close to targets and record conversations.
I'm trying to imagine this, a cat wired up with a microphone trying to sneak into some top secret meeting. Sounds a little ridiculous, doesn't it? But I'm sure they were pretty serious about it at the time. What went wrong?
Well, cats, they're not exactly known for their obedience or following orders, right? They're independent creatures. Turns out their feline nature was a major problem.
Huh. So much for our stealthy feline agents. It makes you wonder what other crazy ideas they might have had. But speaking of secrets, let's move on to, well, the ultimate symbol of government secrecy, Area 51.
Area 51, it's really captured the public's imagination for, like, decades. This remote base way out in the Nevada desert, shrouded in all this secrecy, all these rumors. For years, nobody knew what it was really for. Led to a lot of speculation, about alien autopsies, reverse-engineered UFOs.
It's like a pop culture icon at this point, a place where literally anything seems possible. Did those declassified documents actually tell us anything about what was going on there? Were they hiding aliens, or was it something a little more down to earth?
Well, the truth about Area 51, it's a little bit exciting in all the rumors. The declassified documents, they show that it was mainly used for testing and developing top-secret aircraft during the Cold War. Basically a hub for pushing the limits of aviation technology.
So no aliens then. Bummer. But I guess developing super advanced aircraft, that's pretty cool too. What kind of aircraft were they working on at Area 51?
Some of the most iconic aircraft, I guess you could say. Like the U-2 spy plane, it was designed for high-altitude reconnaissance missions flying over Soviet territory. The U-2 was, it was a marvel of engineering, able to fly incredibly high, gather a lot of valuable intelligence on the Soviets.
Makes sense. I can see why they'd want to keep that under wraps. But, they couldn't keep it secret forever, right? Were there any, leaks or incidents that blew their cover at Area 51?
You're right, the truth eventually came out, and it happened in a pretty dramatic way. Back in 1960, a U-2 spy plane piloted by Francis Gary Powers was shot down over the Soviet Union.
Oh, wow.
It was a huge deal. Yeah, it did this massive international crisis, basically exposed the CIA's covert operations to the entire world.
I bet that was a pretty embarrassing moment for the U.S. government. Their whole cover story about it being a weather plane, that fell apart pretty quickly, didn't it? They got caught, like, re-handed.
Yeah, the U-2 incident, it didn't just increase tensions during the Cold War, it also showed just how risky these covert operations could be. And while it did force the U.S. to admit that the U-2 program existed, it didn't exactly stop people from being fascinated by Area 51, right? If anything, it probably just made the mystery and intrigue surrounding the base even bigger.
I guess the more they tried to keep it secret, the more people became convinced that something truly wild was happening there. It's funny how our imaginations work, you know? We love a good mystery.
Yeah, absolutely. And that fascination, it's still around today, even though we know what Area 51 was really used for. The combination of, government secrecy, advanced tech, and the whole allure of the unknown, it's created a breeding ground for all kinds of conspiracy theories.
It's a good reminder that sometimes the truth isn't as exciting as the stories we make up, isn't it? But even without aliens, the CIA's activities during the Cold War, they're captivating, thought-provoking. We've seen how they pushed ethical boundaries in their pursuit of mind control, engaged in these covert operations to try to influence global politics, and even tried out some pretty outlandish technologies.
And we're not even done yet. We still have to explore Operation Condor. This is one of the most notorious covert operations in Latin America. And it really reveals a dark chapter of political repression and the far-reaching consequences of Cold War paranoia.
Operation Condor. It does sound kind of ominous, doesn't it? Like the name of some spy thriller or something. So what's the deal with this operation?
It's a really dark chapter in Latin American history. We're talking about a coordinated campaign of political repression, state-sponsored terror, all that, happening in a bunch of South American countries during the 1970s. Argentina, Chile, Uruguay, Paraguay, Brazil, they were all in on it. And these countries, they were all ruled by right-wing dictatorships at the time. They basically teamed up to go after political opponents, activists, anyone they thought was a threat.
So like a network of dictatorships working together to eliminate their enemies. That's pretty scary. What kind of tactics are we talking about here?
Well, they used everything. Surveillance, kidnappings, torture, extrajudicial killings, people just disappearing. It was like this systematic attempt to silence anyone who disagreed with them, to maintain control through, fear and intimidation. We're talking about thousands of people affected by this, and a lot of them were just innocent civilians who got caught in the crossfire.
Sounds like a truly awful time. So what about the CIA? What was their role in all this? Were they just like aware of what was happening, or were they more actively involved?
That's the thing, right? It's complicated, and people are still debating just how involved the CIA really was. We know from declassified documents that they knew about Operation Condor, and they definitely provided support to some of these regimes. But whether they were like the masterminds behind it all, or if they just turned a blind eye to the brutality, that's still something historians are trying to figure out.
It's unsettling to think that the U.S. might have been involved in these atrocities, even if it wasn't directly. Makes you question their foreign policy during the Cold War, right? Like, how far were they willing to go to fight communism, even supporting authoritarian regimes?
Yeah.
What do you think the lasting impact of Operation Condor has been?
Well, it definitely left a deep scar on Latin America. It created this atmosphere of fear and suspicion that lasted for years, and the effects are still felt today. You have families still looking for answers about loved ones who vanished, and a lot of people are still fighting for justice for the crimes that were committed. It's a powerful reminder, of the human cost of political repression and the danger of unchecked power.
It is, yeah. It makes you appreciate the importance of, democratic institutions, the rule of law, all that to protect people's rights.
Exactly. Transparency, accountability, respect for human rights, these are all essential for any society that wants to be just and free. Operation Condor is a cautionary tale about what happens when those values are ignored.
Well, we've gone through a lot today, haven't we? From mind control experiments to political repression in South America, we've seen a lot of the CIA's dark side.
It's true. But it's important to remember that history isn't just like facts and dates in a textbook. It's about people, the choices they made, and how those choices affect the world, sometimes for a really long time. These declassified operations give us this peek into a side of the CIA that we never used to see. And it forces us to confront some pretty uncomfortable truths about, about power, about the things powerful people do.
It's definitely been an eye-opening experience, that's for sure. We've seen how the CIA was willing to push ethical boundaries, how they engaged in covert actions that actually destabilized entire governments, and sometimes they even used tactics that seem, I don't know, almost too crazy to be true.
And it leaves us with a lot of questions. What else is still hidden? How do we find that balance between national security and individual rights? And how do we actually learn from the past so we don't make the same mistakes again?
It's a lot to think about. Thanks for helping us make sense of all of this.
Happy to do it. These events, even the ones that are hard to face, they're important to learn about. It helps us understand the world we live in, right?
Absolutely. And to our listeners, we hope you've gotten something out of this deep dive into the world of the CIA. As you keep learning and exploring, remember to stay curious, stay critical, and stay engaged. History, it's a powerful tool. It can help us understand the present and maybe even shape the future.